Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Bye.
Okay, tell them bye.
Bye. Bye.
All right. Hope everyone is having a great Sunday. We have this lesson and I think one more, and then I will be done with the book Getting Along. I have another book. I should have brought it out here. I forgot the name of it. That I will be starting in 2 weeks. These seem to be going pretty well, and I like how they are falling into place in the format that they use. So I have the next ones lined up. But today we're going to talk about communication. And we're going to talk about how we communicate with each other. And I never really thought about it, but it was broke down this way, that there's a lot involved in communication, that it's more than just talking to someone. And if you usually ask somebody, hey, how do you communicate, or what does communication mean, it's talking. But there's more to that. And if we ever thought about it, if we ever sit down and think about it, communication involves what I meant to say, what I actually said, what the other person heard, what the other person thinks they heard, and what the other person says about what you said. So when you think about that, communication is very, very important. And in listening and making sure that you get everything right if you're going to repeat it is very important. And that reminded me of the telephone game. When communication involves what I meant to say and what I actually said. You know, sometimes we mean to say something a certain way and it comes out all wrong. Okay? But then when you do the telephone game, I say something, but that's not what the other person heard. And even if it was what the other person heard, it's not what they thought they heard. And then they pass it down to the third person, and it's what the other person thinks is what you said. And by the time you get to the line, it's never right. It's never right. So when we're thinking about this, when we think about communicating with people, I want us to think a lot about all these aspects, not just talking, but what all is involved. How many people are involved in communicating, and make sure that it is done in the proper way and said the right way, and we can see how easily it gets twisted. And we see a great example of this, and we have talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again. And it's Luke 10:38 through 42. And as you all know, this is about Mary and Martha. And it says, now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. As she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve all alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. But one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken from her. So we see here that Mary and Martha have a visitor. They have Jesus over their house. They have friends over. They have people over. They have company. And like most women, when we have visitors, what do? We want our house to look tidy, and we want everything in order. And we see that is exactly what's happening here. The company has already arrived. There's still last-minute things that need to be done. And Martha is running around. Well, sometimes we say like with a chicken with her head cut off. She's trying to get everything laid out. She's hurrying. She knows she's out of time. The people are already at her house. And all her sister is doing, she just plops down and starts visiting. She starts listening to what Jesus has to say. And we see in verse 40, she had enough. She had enough. And she went straight up to Jesus and said, make her help me. Do something. You see me doing this. Do something. Now, that is a communication that I had never really thought of before. But how many of us communicate like Martha? That we don't go to Mary, the person we're having a problem with. We go to somebody else. She went to Jesus. And we got so mad, we hold it all in until we explode. And we see that's what Martha did. Martha could have told Mary she needed help, and maybe she did. We're not told. And she didn't have to get so frustrated about it. But she didn't. She let it build up until she couldn't keep it inside anymore. We see that Martha went to Jesus and complained instead of going to Mary. She did it in front of everyone. And it's like I said, it's not recorded in the Bible that Martha ever told Mary that she wanted help. We don't know if she had asked her before. We don't know if Mary was unwilling. All we know is that Martha, clear as day, was getting the house ready, was finishing up the food, whatever she was doing, to prep for this company, and Mary just sat down and started talking or listening. She did not help at all. How many of us do the same thing today? How many of us get mad at someone, get frustrated with someone, and instead of going to that someone, we go and complain? Perfect example is a boss relationship. You get frustrated with your boss, you get mad at your boss. Instead of going and saying, hey, I have a problem, I don't like this, or can you explain why this is going this way? Can you do it this way? We go to our coworker and we badmouth our boss. Oh, they're a terrible boss. Can you believe they're making us do that? Can you believe they acted that way? Can you believe they called me out in front of that customer? Can you believe she's mad at me today? Can you believe how much work she gave me today? And we let the irritation grow and grow and grow until we can no longer hold our tongue. Better yet, what about families? What about we get so mad at a sibling, but yet we don't go directly to that sibling. We go to another family member, whether it be a sibling, whether it be a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent. Especially if we're mad at our parents, what do? We go to our grandparents. And, oh, grandma, my daddy's so mean to me. My daddy's so mad. He made me clean my room. He made me do this. He wouldn't let me go out with my friends because I didn't get this stuff done. Instead of going directly to the dad. Although usually when we do that, we know we're in the wrong. But we all let that irritation grow till we no longer can hold our tongue, and then we lash out on the wrong person. And that's one way to communicate, but that's not the right way. How much better would our relationships be if we would just talk to each other openly and work things out and not let it get to that frustrated point, boiling point, exploding point? And another thing, when we communicate with others, we need to genuinely listen. Sometimes we are so eager to speak, we hardly let the other person finish. And we typically do this when we are confronted and are being defensive and trying to think of words to defend ourselves. The Bible tells us that we have to be careful about these kinds of interactions. We need to learn to truly listen and then respond. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame. When we listen, we have a better chance to understand what the other person is thinking. And we see this in John 4, verses 1 through 26. And this is an example given to us of Jesus listening. And it says, now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water, so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you are right in saying I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true. The woman said to him, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. We see here that Jesus listened to this woman. This is especially important to remember that Jesus and this woman were in two totally different situations and should not have interacted like this, but they did. Jews, Jesus, typically didn't have interactions with Samaritans, this woman. These two groups were divided because of race and religion, yet Jesus spoke to this woman. In the ancient world, a man did not typically interact with women that were not family or a close family friend, yet here Jesus met this woman and talked to her. She was most likely a social outcast because of coming to the well at noon when most women gathered water in the afternoon. Yet despite all these things against them, Jesus listened to her and responded by satisfying her thirst for spiritual things. What we can learn here is that it is important to listen and communicate properly, even with people that others in society may not interact with. What an important skill for us to have in that we listen to others and acknowledge them and respond properly, especially when people have a different point of view than us, and we can listen and not become defensive, but actually listen and respond properly. And also, lastly, the last thing I want to talk about communication is we need to think about our responses. How many times when someone asks us to do something, we immediately say yes, even when we really don't want to, when we don't have time, when we just think we can't say no. Our answer is always yes. How many times do we do that? So we have to stop and think about our responses. And another biblical example of this is someone making a rash decision is like Japheth in Judges 11 verses 30 through 40. And it says, And Japheth made a vow to the Lord and said, If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So Japheth crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. And he struck them from Aroer into the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel-Kermim, with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Then Japheth came to his home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. And she said to him, My father, you have opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites. So she said to her father, Let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, and I and my companions. So he said, Go. Then he sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and wept for her virginity on the mountains. And at the end of 2 months she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Japheth, the Gileadite, 4 days in the year. This example shows us that sometimes we need to slow down and think before we speak. Because when we don't, we can develop negative feeling towards people or feel burdened by them. Or it can put us in a situation that is not proper or could cause problems. And if we were honest, we wouldn't develop those hard feelings and could honestly communicate with others. We need to listen to what is being asked of us and then take time to decide if we're able to do what is being asked. So as we end this devotional today, I'm going to end with one more verse that I found, and it is Proverbs 25:11. And it says, A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Silence might be golden, but our words can be also. So sometimes, like this says here, all about listening. Silence might be golden, but our words could also be golden. Think before we speak. So as we go this week, I want us to think about our communication and think about all aspects of it. Think about, like we started it, what did I mean to say? What did I actually say? what did the other person hear? What did the other person think they heard? And what is the other person saying we said? When we take all of that and think about that, and we take time to stop and think about what we're going to say before we say it, we think about our responses, especially if we're hurt, especially if we're wanting to lash out, especially if it's in a frustrating situation or an anger situation. If we stop and think, then sometimes our answers won't be as harsh. Sometimes we won't be committing ourselves to do something we really don't want to do. Something we just don't have time for, something that's maybe out of our comfort zone, which that's not necessarily a bad thing, but saying no is not a bad thing either. If we really communicate and you're super busy and your schedule is just full that week and you can't put another thing in, it's okay to say no. But when you say no, think about that communication. How are you going to say it? How's the other person going to hear it? Is it going to come out the way you want it to come out, the way you want it to portray it? How's the other person going to hear it? What's the other person going to think you said? And what's the other person going to go tell others you said? And I think if we stop and think about all of that before we make any type of answer of anything, it would cut down on a lot of hard feelings and hurt feelings, and it would help everybody in the communication process. And like always, we've all heard, sometimes people just need to listen. Sometimes people just need to vent, and they need someone to listen to them. And that is another key part of communication. It's just genuinely listening, really listening to them and hearing what they are really saying, so that we don't get mixed up if we relay that information to somebody else. We're relaying it in the right way and the way that the person wanted it to be told or be said, instead of how we think it should be said. So this week, I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all here next week. Thank you for listening like always.